Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate
How you doing?
and with Travis,
Hello.
and we are getting together tonight to discuss William Blake's poem, "A Poison Tree." Before we get to that, as usual, I will remind anyone watching or listening, if you like my work, if you would, like to support me, please sign up at subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. Anywhere between $1 and $5 a month you can sign up for. And I would also like to remind people if you are watching this on YouTube, you can go subscribe on BitChute as well, bitchueute.com. You can look up Zachlog over there. Yes, it has another word in it. It was poor planning on their part. Don't look at me. Anyway, but
I was saying, I guess the Australians think that means a really weak pickup truck.
but
Because ute is slang for pickup truck in Ausland.
Anyway, but I am mentioning this tonight because just today, YouTube decided that one of my videos was no longer acceptable on YouTube, and they kicked it off. I might appeal it, I might not. But I'll put a link to the BitChute version of what YouTube doesn't want you to see. It's and anyway, yeah, I think that covers all the introductory material. So Travis has volunteered to read the poem, so I'm going to put it up on the screen in just a moment here. And there we have it. Okay, is it showing up yet?
I see it.
Okay. All right. Then Travis, at your leisure.
All right. A Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath. My wrath did not... excuse me. Let's start over. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath. My wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree.
Okay. And here, let me stop that and back to it. Okay. All right. Thank you, Travis. So I guess since Travis just read, Nate, would you like to lead off with what you were, with what you think about this one? First thoughts?
I was a bit conflicted about it because, it seemed to cut against our, the usual moral grain of what we're talking about, because it seems like you're nursing revenge. But the more I read it, the more I thought it sounds a lot more like malicious compliance. Like, this guy, or you know what? Fine, I'm going to do everything they ask, and I'm just going to keep paying out rope until they eventually hang themselves. And so finally one day it came, like I've been keeping notes and, records of all our communications and all this stuff. And finally one day someone's come up, why did you screw up this thing? Well, I was told to screw up and destroy this massively expensive or important piece of equipment. What do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Frank told me. And Frank's the department head, so I had to do what Frank said, but I had warned him here, and here. Here's all the documentation. And then suddenly Frank's whole career is just... So that's kind of what it reminded me of in the modern sense.
Okay. Travis, how about you? What are your thoughts here?
So, I mean, the first two stanzas, they seem pretty straightforward. You kind of know what's going on. And then the last two stanzas, it gets a little more, you have to think about it, like what's happening. But it seems to me, it's very much setting up the paradigm of, okay, you're angry at someone, you know them, and you say, I feel this and I'm sorry, and you work it out and you move on. Where with the foe, you just kind of hide it and you just kind of let it sit there and fester, and you smile at them at work each day as you go in, and like nothing's going on and nothing's the matter, like you don't want to rip their throat out. And it just keeps building like that, both day and night, until there's this apple bright. And I don't have a good feeling for exactly what that apple bright is, but maybe it's the lie of something existing in a friendly nature, I don't know, between you at this point. Yeah. And then they eat the apple and die.
I actually have a great example of this in a movie. And it's actually a very fascinating movie and pretty entertaining. It's called What the Deaf Man Heard. And essentially, there's this kid, he gets like taken away from his parents at a young age, and he was not a very talkative kid. And so everybody assumed, from an early age that the kid was deaf. And so, people would say things around him they wouldn't normally say because, well, he's deaf. Except for he wasn't. And for like 30 years of his life, he goes around just, observing people as they interact, and he ends up like working for the city or something like that. He works like for an organization. Well, it turns out some of the people in that organization are corrupt, and he knows it, and they treat him like crap. I'm figuring, what's he going to do about it? He ain't got no family. He ain't got no position. No one cares about this deaf dude. So they treat him like crap, and they plot in front of him, and finally get brought to trial. And the movie ends with they bring him up, the lawyers taking witness testimony, and they call him up there, and everybody's looking at each other like, what's going on? They're like, well, this is stupid. This guy doesn't know anything. He couldn't know anything. And then they say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And he kind of looks over at the guys who had been treating him like crap, and he goes, I do. And they're like, no, because they know their goose just got incinerated.
So, okay. What the Deaf Man Heard, is that right?
What the Deaf Man Heard. Spoiler entirely now. I mean, you don't even really need to watch the movie except for the amusement of actually seeing it all happen.
But so I found this poem in an anthology I was reading through last year, and I immediately liked it. I immediately knew I was going to record it, but kind of like what Travis said, what I gravitated to immediately was the first stanza, and then I'm honestly kind of confused about what to make of the next of the last ones, because but what grabbed me about the first stanza is to me this is a really big part of the problem with what we call political correctness, because like if you're angry with someone, if you have okay, you take two people, any two people in the world, and you put them next to each other, and they have to deal with each other on a regular basis. At some point, there's going to be conflict. At some point, one person is going to want something, and the other person is going to want something incompatible with that. There's no imaginable way to avoid that. And if in that situation, the one person says, well, I have a problem with this, they can work it out. They can figure out what to do about it. Maybe they won't. Maybe it will escalate, but if they can talk about it, they could work it out. But if you cannot talk about it, if you have this conflict, if you have this disagreement, and you're not allowed to say anything about it, it's just going to get worse. And people are just going to get angrier. And, if it's the kind of thing where, well, you're trying to figure out, okay, what's really going on here? Like, what are these people's intentions, or what's happening? And, you're not allowed to ask about it. You're not allowed to, it's, forbidden from conversation. Then odds are, the person who feels hurt is going to come up with, theories that, well, I mean, not the person who is offended is going to come up with theories about what's going on. Odds are pretty good that those theories are going to be actually worse than the reality. They will imagine a scenario that's worse than what's actually going on, but because they're not allowed to ask, because you can't bring anything out in the open, there's no way for them to check this. There's no way for this false theory of theirs to be disproven. And so, I told it not, my wrath did grow. You take people who have some kind of conflict, you don't allow that to be voiced, you don't allow people to honestly talk through it, and you are just in the long run, you're going to make things make things much, much worse. Go ahead.
What gets me about this is that it very clearly displays the difference between open communication and, honesty about the situation. Because you get two lines about the offense between, him and his friend that is dealt with the proper way, which is,
right.
Hey, I'm pissed. This is why. Oh, sorry, bro. Doop. Done. We're cool. But then you get another couple of dozen lines, about the one that wasn't handled, the best way. And honestly, I feel like the speaker in the poem gets lucky. Because as often as not, that's vengeance and grudges are a blade you cut yourself on as often, if not more than your foe. I mean, there's kind of the worn out saying, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and wishing the other person would die. It's kind of dumb, but apparently, Blake's speaker here gets away with it.
That actually, I really, like I said, I really like the first stanza. That's what grabbed me. But it is kind of curious because, like you said, the kind of common wisdom today is that, these kind of things come back to bite you. That, holding vengeance, is only going to hurt you in the long run. And Blake takes a very different tack on that, and you agree with him. You can agree with him, or you can disagree with him on any particular point, but he wasn't a complete fool, and so if he's taking this kind of angle, you have to say there's something there. I don't know if I understand it, but go ahead.
What is the angle that you're claiming that he's taking exactly? I'm a little unclear.
Well, I mean that he holds this anger, he holds this wrath, and it continues to grow, and this eventually destroys his enemy. Whereas, like what somehow
right. But I think there is, as Nate sort of brought up, like there is this, like Like he's almost like he's surprised to find his foe outstretched that next morning. Like it wasn't intentional. It was just kind of, it worked out that way. I don't know. To me, it seems like, I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And from there, it's kind of like this thing where, like, why did he talk it out with his friend? Well, because he's comfortable with his friend. He feels like his friend's not going to pull his sword out and cut his head off just because he says, I'm angry at you for this. I think a lot of times that's why we end up getting into these positions with our foe, is because what makes them our foe? They have some different angle or stance on life that puts us in sort of a defensive position. So that we're already a little leery about addressing anything with them, let alone something of a dicier nature. And then as far as why the foe ends up outstretched, I mean, the apple, obviously, a fruit grew from his deceit. I mean, he uses the word deceitful wiles. So, I mean, he's clearly he's expressing a friendship and amiability with this foe that doesn't actually exist within him.
My God, they're both women. I just cracked it. He's talking about female society, except for wipe out the first two lines.
It's
that
the
never happened?
It's the Mean Girls phenomenon.
Yeah, I feel like the rest of the poem, until he finds his foe outstretched, as we're talking about it, reminds me more of a keep your friends close and your enemies, in the crosshairs. Yeah, it's like he just waited his time, and finally this apple that grew was, the golden moment to strike.
Well,
he knew it would bring the enemy into his power. It was something that he knew the enemy would want, but he could get and use to destroy him. And so in the end, he took his shot. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of gray. In fact, this whole poem is written in gray.
Right.
Well, and the other thing that makes it kind of odd is, like, his enemy also brought this on himself, because not only did he come and take this apple, till it bore an apple bright. Not only did his enemy come and take this apple, his enemy thought he was stealing it. His enemy intended to steal this from him and took it and poisoned himself. And for the life of me, I don't know. I don't know what to make of the last part. I really don't.
Well, it goes against our Christian philosophy in that he is very most definitely not, forgiving and, allowing this, this retribution to rest with the Lord as he is supposed to. He's holding on to it. Now, is it just retribution? Absolutely. Like you said,
what makes you say it's just? What makes you say it's just?
What his enemy is doing. His enemy has done him some unspecified harm, and then he hangs on. Eventually, the enemy comes in trying to, like Sean said, trying to steal this thing to do him more harm, and ends up hoist on his own petard while trying to do more harm to the protagonist. So, or the speaker, rather. So it's.
I would argue that it wouldn't necessarily
the way you're supposed to be.
It wouldn't necessarily be something that the foe did directly to him, because we can be angry at someone for perceived injustice, and it may not have been an injustice.
Danger comes in, but we don't know that. Like I said, we're only given it from the speaker's point of view, in which, of course, this all seems just. So that's the deceptiveness of, being alone with your own thoughts and not taking an outside view of it. Because clearly he didn't let anybody else know he hated this guy either, or else it probably would have leaked. Somebody would have been like, hey, Frank, Jack hates guts, right? Like, every gut you've got, even the useless ones, which he says is all of them, but he hates you, so.
Well, and like I said, it's, going back to the first part, what what makes this kind of poisonous growth that ends up killing his foe is that he doesn't just come out and say, we got a problem here. I've got a problem with you. We gotta fix this. And like I said, when you can't just come out and say that, when you can't honestly speak about real problems, then you will get, what comes out of that is going to be toxic.
Yeah.
And
I actually have two things to say that might take a minute. So apologies. First is that, well, the first one doesn't take all that long. The first is that another thing to think about with this is, what could he have grown and how much fruit could he have borne instead of one poison apple if he had just used that ground, that metaphorical ground, for something else? Could he have grown an orchard full of, healthy and pleasant apples? Could he have grown, I don't know, some sort of, emotional wheat? I mean, he at least could have made hay while the sun shone, but no, instead he grew this dark and poisonous tree that produced one fruit ever. And so that seems like a real waste of your internal space. And to go back to why, I feel like I agree with Sean that he just couldn't talk to this guy. I was actually listening to an interesting lecture from C.S. Lewis. And it's part of his series on the 4 loves. Now, I knew about 3 of them, and I thought there were ever 3, which is, eros, philia, and agape, right? Sex, friendship, and, like just wholesome, pure love. But he talks about another one, and it's the first one he goes into, as far as I'm aware, which is called storge, which is your love of familiarity. Right? It's the way you love your house, or like the way I love my car. It's this kind of very low intensity thing, and it doesn't really come from anywhere, but it helps you to get along with things. And he has a lot to say about how it can broaden, your perception of good, and how it has a lot of virtues. But I think that's one of the things that civility, not necessarily, PC culture, but actual just civility, being polite and, deferent to each other when you first meet and that kind of thing, gives you time to build up the comfort of storge. Like your coworkers. If you work in a place for years, you're going to eventually be friendly with probably everyone there, unless there's a freaking unremittent scoundrel that works in the place, just because you see them every day, all day. You can't help but get familiar with them, and you will become, in some measure, fond of them. And at that point, once that comfort and fondness has come up, at least in some measure, it allows you to sort of handle these slights. You can be like, hey, whoa, look, we've known each other, but it's like, look, I know you, you know me. Let's not do that. Okay, we haven't really come across this before, but this is no bueno. Let's get a different, let's do something else next time. And they can go, oh, hey, sorry, I didn't know. Cool. And you can talk about it. This seems like whoever he met, whoever his enemy is, may have just been a raging donkey from the very beginning. And so, like I said, he had no civility. They could build no storge. And so instead of being able to talk about it, now, even through all these days, it's a poisoned well. He can't build the storge anyway, because he hates the guy. And so that's all kind of like mashing together, when I started looking at this again this afternoon to refresh my memory, and was like, okay, I have things to say now. Because before I was going to go, boy, apples, huh?
Well, and again, like I've said about a lot of this poem, I don't feel like I know what to make of it, but that it's also an apple bright, which in Christian tradition, that was the corrupting fruit in the Garden of Eden. yes, for any biblical scholars out there, it doesn't actually say an apple in the Bible. I know
The
that
reason
it's
that
just
our conception of it is an apple is for a long time, like, ye olde Englishy did not actually have words for different fruits. If it was a certain kind of fruit, it was called an apple. Just like if it was, any kind of grain or something, it was called a corn, which is how you get a pineapple, which is not even close to an apple, but it has kind of that pine coney look to it, and it's a fruit. So it is, it is an apple as though it were grown from pine. And then, how you get corned beef, which has no corn in it, but barley, because it's barley corns. So like I said, that's why we usually say an apple, because back in, ye olde Englishy, people would be discussing a fruit and they would be like, yes, and she did plucky the apple of yon tree, and dith eateth of it, and was thus corrupted.
I've heard another possible explanation of that. I don't know, but that's certainly possible. I don't know. But like, it in this poem, it is an apple, which for Christians, that kind of points a little bit to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and again, what to make of that? I love how this poem starts so much, and then the rest of it, I'm like, it's there. I don't know.
I mean, I guess one thing I sort of notice is that this apple bright, I mean, this tree is in the narrator's garden. Like, it's like they specifically set up this deceit, or it is something that grows out of them.
Well, yeah, and he
calls this other individual. I mean, it's sort of a deceit that calls this other individual into the garden in the first place.
He is deliberately culturing a falsehood.
Or not stopping it, because there is this sort of sense that it's not necessarily completely, aha, I'm going to skewer you. But it's more, I'm gonna let this lie grow. I'm gonna let this deceit grow, and I'm not gonna stop it, and we'll see what happens.
No, he actually talks in language of tending it. Like, it's like you found a particularly nasty plant just planted in your garden, but then said, you know what? Miracle grow, baby. I'm gonna water this thing. I'm gonna prune it into a nice shape. I want to make sure it's healthy. I'm gonna keep other weeds away from it. I'm gonna make sure I put like some little stakes around it so I don't weed eat it down on accident. This thing is growing.
Well, he tends it. He helps it grow, but at the same time, it's I think Travis said earlier, it feels like it's a surprise when he sees what actually comes of it. To him, it's a happy surprise. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. He was cultivating this lie, but he wasn't. What he intended it for is not clear, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And here's my biggest question. What is the pole? I mean, is that just another word for the tree or the bush or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think that just means trunk of the tree. What I'm going to actually just had a thought.
It's a phallic symbol.
Well, there is that.
I've got a story about a poor young teacher who had me and a couple of my best friends read a poem in a gifted English class, and she thought it was about something entirely different. So she says, "So what do y'all think the poem is about?" And our unanimous answer, in unison even, was sex. She was like, "What? No!" But then we showed it to her. She was like, "Oh God!" We're like, "Yeah, you kind of did that one on your own." But anyway, what I'm wondering about, another thing that goes back to my whole idea that this guy was just sort of lucky. say his enemy hadn't come to steal the apple and been laid out by it, who then would have gotten it? Would he come out in the morning and be like, "Hey, look, an apple"?
Or
Would it
another
have
friend.
come out instead if his enemy hadn't got there first?
Yeah, I don't. Okay, again, to take this analogy and run with it as a real situation. He knows what's growing this. He knows there is something very wrong with this himself. He's not gonna bite into this apple. But like Travis said, a friend, one of his kids, his dog,
I mean, I think if the roots grow deep enough and big enough, they start to overtake him so that he becomes a poison to everything he touches, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, that's...
What I want to know is, does the tree stop growing now?
Well, that is the interesting part, isn't it?
Because your
We're
enemy's
left to
dead.
wonder.
Now you've got this poison tree, and I mean, do you give it the axe and plant some good wholesome stuff there now? I mean,
yeah, it's once
this
you've got
raises a lot more questions than it answers.
It seems more like you've got a newfound villain going ha 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 over the body of this dead foe and becoming a true villain from this point forward. That's what it seems like.
So what you're saying is this is a supervillain's origin story.
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
No, I'm going to say anti-hero. I'm going to say anti-hero.
Punisher?
Anti-hero. All right.
A more passive-aggressive Punisher.
There's a reason the Punisher doesn't have any major recurring villains.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if they recur more than once, you should probably go ahead and be punishing them.
Okay. Like I've said, I love how this starts. I think I get the first part, and I really love what the first stanza says, how and the ideas it's encapsulating there. Forcing silence, forcing people to play nice. When there are real problems, is a great way to foster long-term anger. If your goal is to create bitter resentment between people, then the fastest way to that is never allow them to criticize whatever the group is. Okay.
The Virginia government.
So something jumps out at me right now, like the second stanza, as I look at it. I mean, the last words are fears, tears, smiles, and wiles. And so, like, growing with this wrath, our fear, like this fear, there's a fear in this individual that's helping to foster this. And then tears, which is sadness. And smiles, which in this sense seems like a defense, against whatever is going on.
Well, that's the deception. The smile is the wiles.
Well, but he states it differently. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And so I think that need to put forward the smile is what turns it into this deceit. Perhaps.
Yeah, and so fears, okay.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because, I mean, water is necessary to grow a plant, and, the water comes on with fears and tears, which can almost, those can be, like, involuntary,
Right,
like, oh, man,
exactly.
But...
Or they could be an 80s
sunlight,
band.
The plant doesn't grow, and more sun generally means more plant. And so the sun, the part that really helps it to grow and gather strength and size, was his purposeful deceit. That's actually a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, if you look at the progression there, I watered it in fears. My best guess would be fear of what this enemy is going to do to him next. Fear of how this might go wrong if his enemy gets whatever he wants to do. Night and
Or
morning with my
again,
fears. Sorry?
again, I mean, the thing with fears is they can be completely our own fears based on our own past trauma rather than what this person has actually done to us. I'm not claiming one way or the other here, or maybe a combination of both, but just to point that out as far as fears go.
Yeah,
very
and the tears would be again, my best guess would be over his loss of whatever this enemy has done to him.
Or how they poked what was done to him in the past, like their past trauma, potentially. Because I think that's where a lot of tension ends up coming from, is touching old hurts rather than it being so much about the new hurt.
Was yeah, I remember there's this one blogger I read who says, like, you can really see a lot of people, like, several decades later still carrying the roles they were cast into in high school. When there's no one around who knew them then, there's no reason for them to carry this kind of thinking. But just whatever they got shoved into in that environment, they still carry those kind of scars today, and they still do a lot of dumb things sometimes based on that.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've said most of what I want to say about this one. Nate, anything else? Or
I've said everything I wanted to say, a bunch of things I didn't know I was going to say, and hopefully not anything I'm going to regret.
I think that the poem
you
is
mean
about two women. I think that one's probably going to get you in trouble somewhere.
by the way, did you mean to do the
I'm already in
part
trouble in all those places.
By the way, Nate, did you mean to do the part where you read off your enemies list and what you're planning to do to each of them?
I don't remember doing that.
I was just checking about things that might get you in trouble. I could go back and edit that out if you need.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Definitely, don't tell them about. Or
And then I could avoid.
And plus, and also,
And then I can avoid being added
don't talk
to the
about
list.
chihuahuas either. Edit all that last part out.
Travis, anything else you wanted to say tonight?
No, I think that about covers it for me.
Okay. Well,
except don't sneak into my garden.
In the morning, glad I see my foe with a bullet from my AR-15.
Yeah, the shining apple is actually a tactical flashlight.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, and I'll catch you guys again soon.
All right.
Yeah, likewise, man.
All right. Bye.